Evening.
Ever
Do you know
watch
why
a
we pulled you
routine
over
traffic
tonight?
stop turn into a full-blown systems failure for the people who
No
thought
problem
they
at all,
were in
ma'am. We're just
control?
conducting a routine
Stay with
check.
me, because two officers try to flex on the wrong woman, and by sunrise, the whole department is staring down the kind of consequences you can't talk your way out of. You planning to talk back to me, Officer Nash? The words hit the evening air sharp and smug, like a blade flash just to see if it scares somebody. Officer Nash Cromwell's hand was already drifting toward his cuffs before Indira Rosewood had even breathed a reply. Red and blue lights washed a quiet suburban street in harsh pulses, carving shadows across her face. Indira Black, mid-40s, steady posture, eyes that had seen worse than this met his stare with the calm of someone who doesn't waste energy on theatrics. I haven't said anything, she replied, voice low and controlled, the kind of restraint that comes from 2 decades of training where a single sloppy word can cost lives. 2 white officers flanked her car, moving with unnecessary aggression even though she was fully compliant. Cromwell held her license, registration, and ID in his hand, but his attention wasn't on the paperwork. It was on her refusal to give him what he expected: fear, pleading, performance. The cuffs snapped shut around her wrists. In her pocket, her phone buzzed again and again, the screen lighting up with a name that meant nothing to these men. Pentagon Priority Line. They had no idea what they'd just done. Not yet. The stop had started like 1,000 others. Procedural, forgettable, a box to check at the end of a shift. Indira had been driving home from Quantico after a classified briefing, brain still running through logistics, risk matrices, and the kind of decisions that don't make the news unless they go wrong. She noticed the patrol headlights in her rear view, checked her speedometer 32 and a 35, and pulled over with smooth, practiced motions. If you've ever worked in environments where tension is real and consequences are permanent, you know what that kind of muscle memory looks like. Economy of movement. Hands visible. No surprises. Cromwell approached the driver's window with the swagger of a man who had never once questioned the shape of his authority. His partner, Carlos Vega, posted up near the passenger side like the manual says, though he did it with a hostility that turned standard procedure into looking for a reason. Cromwell's pale eyes swept the interior like he was hunting for contraband in a lab he didn't understand. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked. Indira recognized the opening move. Not a question. A fishing lure. Get the driver to guess, then treat the guess like a confession. "No, sir," she said evenly. "Speeding. 38 in a 35. The lie rolled out of him like he'd said it 100 times. Indira had watched the gauge. But she also knew arguing over a number on the side of the road rarely helps when the other side already decided the outcome. Cromwell tapped his fingers on the doorframe, waiting for the reaction he wanted. None came. License, registration, insurance. Indira reached for her wallet slowly and deliberately, announcing what she was doing before she did it. Visible hands. Controlled pace. Same habits that keep people alive in hostile territories. Cromwell inspected the military ID with open skepticism, as if the idea that she might be who the card said she was didn't fit his model. Vega drifted closer, drawn in by whatever quiet signal Cromwell gave off. "This is a military ID," Cromwell said. Not with respect, but with suspicion. "Yes, sir. What's your job on base?" That was outside traffic enforcement. Indira had no obligation to satisfy curiosity, and her clearance certainly didn't allow her to discuss actual duties. "Administration," she answered. Technically true in a way that would have made her professor smile. She administered operations that moved people and resources across continents. Vega snorted. "Administration, huh? Must pay pretty well for a Honda like this." The line wasn't about the car. It was about the assumption that her presence in it needed explanation. 20 years of service, decorated tours, commendations that required signatures from people Cromwell would never meet. None of it registered for these men who saw only the story they expected to see. Indira kept her tone steady. "Is there a problem with my registration?" Cromwell's jaw tightened. "I'm asking the questions here. Where were you coming from tonight, work? Workwear specifically?" Another step outside the legal scope. Indira felt the constitutional law she'd learned at Howard University click into place, like a torque wrench finding its seat. She knew exactly what they were doing, building a pretext, trying to get her to volunteer material they could twist later. From work, Sir Vega leaned closer, too close, breath smelling like coffee and entitlement. "You being smart with us?" "No, sir, I'm answering your questions." "You're not answering them completely," Indira held his gaze. I've provided all documentation you requested and answered questions about the traffic stop. The phrase traffic stop mattered. It reminded them and her that their authority here wasn't infinite. Cromwell handed her ID back reluctantly. Step out of the vehicle. May I ask why? Because I'm telling you to no justification. Just a power test. Indira saw the trap instantly. If she refused, they'd claim obstruction. If she complied, they'd escalate. Either way, they were trying to force a narrative where she was the problem. She unbuckled, opened the door, and stepped out with the same slow precision she'd used in war zones when unknown hands were on unknown weapons. The air smelled of wet leaves and incoming rain. Neighborhood houses sat dark and still behind them. Nothing in the scene to suggest what was actually happening. Constitutional rights being quietly eroded under the cover of routine policing. Cromwell positioned himself between her and her car, chest puffed, tone sharpened. You want to tell me what you're really doing out here? Driving home from work. That's all you've got to say? Yes, sir. He stepped closer, close enough that she saw the muscle twitching at his jaw. You know what I think? I think you're being deliberately uncooperative. I think you're trying to make this difficult. Indira didn't respond. Engineers know silence can be data too. When someone is trying to bait you into noise, you don't give them the signal they want. A cool droplet hit her cheek, the first hint of a storm rolling in. Cromwell took her silence as permission to do what he'd already planned. He reached for her wrist. That's what I thought. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice. The cuffs closed around her wrist with a final click that sounded like a door sealing on a bad decision. Inside the patrol car, the air was stale coffee and disinfectant, the smell of institutional indifference. Indira sat in the back, hands secured behind her. Cromwell drove one-handed, checking her in the rear view every few seconds, waiting for her to crack. You know what your problem is? He said, turning toward the district station. You think you're better than everybody. Got that military attitude like rules don't apply to you. Vega twisted around in his seat, face smug. I've seen your type. Think that uniform makes you special. Out here, you're just another citizen who needs to learn respect. Indira let their talk roll off her like rain off armor. She'd been questioned by enemy combatants with higher stakes and sharper tools. This was amateur hour with badges. The station came into view. Squat brick building squeezed between a gas station and a strip mall. Fluorescent lights buzzed behind barred windows. Patrol cars sat in neat lines like testimony to routine. Hope you don't have anywhere important tomorrow, Cromwell said as he parked. This attitude adjustment takes time. Through the back entrance past a break room, where officers glanced up from dinner, mildly curious. The booking area ran like a conveyor, process, label, store. A desk sergeant looked up with practiced boredom. What we got? Obstruction, Cromwell announced, proud like he'd landed a prize. Traffic stop went sideways when she got smart. The sergeant's eyes flicked over Indira, her posture, her calm, the military ID in the folder. Any priors haven't run it yet, Vega said. But look at her military ID, expensive car, attitude. Probably thinks she's above the law because she played soldier. Indira filed every word away. She knew the value of logs. Bag her effects, the sergeant ordered. Phone, wallet, jewelry. Cromwell pulled her phone out and held it up like contraband. Fancy phone for someone in administration?
We have a federal warrant for the
government issued, she said. Vega chuckled. Must be some important paperwork you're pushing fingerprints. Photos, forms, all procedure wrapped in humiliation. Finally, cell 3. The holding cell was a concrete box, metal bench, toilet that hadn't been cleaned in a long time. Fluorescent bulb flickering like it was tired too. Cromwell removed the cuffs rougher than necessary, leaving red marks. Hope you're comfortable, he said. Might be here a while. She started counting, not minutes, but violations. False speed claim. Scope creep. Unjustified order out of vehicle. Arrest without probable cause. Denial of counsel. Each one another bolt loosened in their case. Hours passed, hunger and fatigue set in, but her posture never slumped. Around 2 a.m., they brought her upstairs to an interrogation room engineered for discomfort. Hard metal table, buzzing lights, chairs arranged to make the officer feel bigger. Sergeant Dale Whitmore entered with a file and coffee. Mid-40s, gray hair trimmed, like someone who once served and forgot why. Indira Rosewood, he said, like tasting the name. Where's that from? Detroit Rough City. Military must have been your way out. The folder like it held secrets. What kind of work do you do at Quantico? Administration's broad. Logistics coordination. True, if you understand logistics as moving people and capability where they need to be, safely, on time, under threat. Logistics, he repeated, skeptical. That why you need an expensive car? The same loop. Create suspicion, demand explanations, treat the explanations as guilt. My finances are in order. I'm sure they are, but a woman your age driving that kind of car raises questions? Indira met his gaze. Are you suggesting I've committed a financial crime? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking questions until answers make sense. I've answered. You've given responses. There's a difference. He leaned in, voice hardening. Here's what happened. You got pulled over legitimately and you copped an attitude. I complied with all lawful requests. Lawful requests, he scoffed. Listen to you, talking like a lawyer. I'm being accurate. You're being difficult. He paced, performing frustration. You think you're smarter than everyone in here. Indira stayed silent. He needed her to fill a blank. She didn't. That's what I thought, he said, deciding her quiet was proof. You're going to answer properly, or this night gets longer. Indira lifted her chin a fraction. I want to make a phone call. Whitmore smiled like she'd made a cute mistake. Phone call? Who you calling? That's my constitutional right. Constitution? He laughed. You'll get your call when I decide you earned it. Dawn creeped in gray through barred windows. Indira kept counting. 7 hours total. Nearly 6 hours denied a call. Interrogated without counsel. The kind of process that collapses under federal review. At 6:30, Cromwell appeared at her cell time for your phone call. 3 minutes. Local only. She walked to the old payphone in booking. Vega watched, still smug. Indira lifted the receiver and dialed a number she'd memorized long ago. Through military networks in seconds. Pentagon Operations, Staff Sergeant Morrison. This is Brigadier General Rosewood, ID 77 Delta 994 Alpha. I need General Kingsley immediately. A 3-second pause. Ma'am, he's in meetings until 800. Priority Alpha, wake him. Yes, ma'am, stand by. Cromwell and Vega exchanged a look. The cadence of her speech was different from anyone they'd heard in this building. Another voice came on, deep and unmistakably senior. Indira, this is Garrett. What's your situation? I'm being held unlawfully at District 12. No charges filed. Probable cause non-existent. Rights violated. I'm requesting intervention under Title 18, Section 242. If you know that statute, you know it ends careers. How long detained? Ikra 7 hours 40 minutes. A beat of silence. Understood. Federal intervention authorized. Expect contact within 30 minutes. Roger. She hung up and sat down. Calm. Signal sent. Now wait for system response. Cromwell crept closer, uncertainty leaking into his voice. Federal intervention? What's that supposed to mean? It means you should call your supervisor, Indira said evenly. Vega grabbed his radio, suddenly jittery. 25 minutes later, 3 black SUVs with federal plates rolled into the lot like a hard reboot. Men in dark suits stepped out. The first through the door wore 3 stars on his shoulders. The air in booking froze. I'm General Garrett Kingsley, Deputy Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he said, voice flat with authority. I'm here for Brigadier General Rosewood. The silence after that felt like a pressure drop. Cromwell went pale. Vega stood stiff as a board. Where is she? Kingsley asked. Cromwell pointed shakily. Basement. Cell 3. Release her. Now Cromwell fumbled for keys like a man suddenly realizing gravity applies to him. Vega tried to talk. Sir, she was arrested for obstruction. Kingsley turned that calm, lethal attention on him. Officer, you've just admitted to unlawfully a senior military officer for over 7 hours. I suggest you stop speaking until your attorney arrives. They descended to the basement. The cell door opened. Indira rose, posture shifting from patient endurance to full military bearing. General Rosewood, Kingsley said quietly, anger under control. Are you injured? No, sir. Physically unharmed. Good. This is unacceptable. An aide raised a recorder. Ma'am, we need a preliminary statement. DOJ and Civil Rights Division are notified. Agents en route. Upstairs, the station felt like a crime scene. Day shift officers arrived early, whispering. Whitmore stood by the desk, face ashen. Kingsley cut through the room. Sergeant Whitmore, you interrogated General Rosewood without counsel and denied a phone call for 6 hours. Whitmore tried to speak. The facts didn't let him. Another aide read from a tablet. General Rosewood holds top-secret SCI clearance. Detaining her without notifying military authorities violates multiple federal statutes. Your interrogation risks compromise of classified information. Military intelligence now has jurisdiction. That was the moment the room fully understood it wasn't just about a bad stop. It was about a small authority system colliding with a much larger one. Captain Reynolds tried to salvage. General, perhaps we can discuss. There's nothing to discuss, Kingsley said. Federal agents are arriving to begin a comprehensive investigation. Contact your counsel. Cromwell tried one last plea. Sir, we were doing our jobs. She was uncooperative. Kingsley didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Officer Cromwell, stop talking. The convoy left under the stare of local media that had caught wind of something big. In the SUV, Kingsley glanced at Indira. You want the investigation to go broad. I want the whole department examine training, procedures, culture. Already in motion, he said. This doesn't happen in isolation. Federal building, Indira gave a full timeline to DOJ, FBI, and state investigators. Body cam footage played. It matched her account and went further. Pre-stop audio caught Vega saying, Bet she's got warrants. Look at that attitude already. Before they'd even spoken to her. Another clip showed Whitmore denying her lawful call. The DOJ Assistant AG closed her folder. We're filing Title 18, Section 242 charges. Pattern and practice investigation goes active today. 3 weeks later, the disciplinary hearing was public. Federal observers seated in the room, cameras rolling. Indira walked in wearing full-dress uniform. Ribbons telling a quiet story of 2 decades earned the hard way. The footage played again, every violation visible. She testified cleanly. I complied with all lawful requests. I declined questions outside the traffic scope. Defense tried to call her uncooperative. She shut it down with calm precision. Compliance is adherence to law, not submission to curiosity. The hearing ended the way physics ends a bad design. Cromwell and Vega terminated. Whitmore terminated, pension revoked, all 3 referred for federal prosecution. 6 months later, District 12 had new leadership, rewritten policies, mandatory multi-angle recording, bias audits, civilian oversight, and recruits studying her case as a live-fire example of what happens when authority forgets its constraints. Indira drove past the same intersection one evening, hands steady, system now altered because she refused to supply the fear they were counting on. Her bomber jacket hung in her closet like an artifact, not a trophy, not a trauma relic, just evidence that principled resistance can force a redesign. And that night would last less than 24 hours for her, but the consequences would ripple for years, because when a system violates its own core rules, the correction doesn't come from noise. It comes from documentation, discipline, and the right call to the right line.